Hey everyone, welcome back to the study on Daniel. I'm recording this today in October in Amarillo, Texas, and uncharacteristically early. We have a blanket of snow outside, and it is just beautiful. And the trees have started turning yellow. There's a bunch of locust trees near my house, and they've dropped their leaves across the surface of the snow, and it's absolutely beautiful. So, anyway, it's a beautiful day in October, great day to snuggle up and think about a Bible study. So, in today's lesson, we're going to go ahead and move on to Daniel chapter 7. But Daniel chapter 7 is epic. It is so important and it's vital to our understanding of eschatology, or the study of end times. And so, we're going to spend 3 different lessons studying Daniel chapter 7. In the first lesson, we're going to compare the vision of Daniel's beasts to Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel chapter 2. Then we're going to look at an Old Testament appearance of Christ himself from Daniel chapter 7. And then we'll finish by comparing the beasts of Daniel 7 to the beast of Revelation. So we're going to look back a little bit into Daniel, and we're going to look forward into Revelation. So we're going to break this up into 3 different lessons and really examine the important scriptures of Daniel chapter 7. Let's go ahead and read the first part of Daniel chapter 7, verses 1 through 8. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised itself up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped with the residue of its feet with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So here in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel has this vision of 4 beasts. It was during the reign of Babylon that Daniel has this vision. We know because we're told it was during the king Belshazzar's reign, and Belshazzar was one of the descendants of Nebuchadnezzar. So this is during the reign of Babylon, and if you'll recall, Daniel chapter 6, the story of Daniel in the lion's den, that was during the reign of the Medes and Persians. It was under King Darius, a Persian king. So we can see that the chapters of Daniel are certainly not in chronological order. Now, we talked about this in the very first lesson, but if we look at the time clues at the beginning of each chapter of Daniel regarding which king is referenced and what year of that king is referenced, we can loosely get a chronology for the chapters of Daniel. So chapters 1 through 4 come in chronological order. And then after chapter 4, remember the fall of Nebuchadnezzar's great tree? Comes chapter 7. So Daniel has these visions of the 4 beasts, and then in chapter 8, his vision of the ram and the he-goat, before the experience of the handwriting on the wall in chapter 5, the vision of the 70 weeks in chapter 9, Daniel in the lion's den in chapter 6, and the rest of Daniel. So Daniel is certainly not in chronological order, and we can see that here in this particular chapter. So again, the question is why? Why is Daniel not written in chronological order? By profession, I am a math professor. I like things in order. Tell me what happens at the beginning, what are the steps in the middle, and what happens at the end. That's just how we're trained to think in our Western society. But Daniel is not written in chronological order, so we need to ask the question, why? Is it just randomly thrown together? course, we can't expect that from the Word of God. It is structured in a very sophisticated and advanced way, but not according to the chronological model. Daniel is organized as a double chiasm or a double chiastic structure. And again, I referenced this in our very first lesson on Daniel. But if we take the first half of Daniel, that is chapter 1 through chapter 7, and we look at parallel themes and events, we get what's called a double chiasm. So, chapter 2 and chapter 7, what we're reading tonight, have parallel structures. And we're going to look at the specific details of that, comparing the details of Daniel's beast to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. In chapter 3, we read about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and their trials in the fiery furnace. Notice chapter 3 is parallel to chapter 6. Chapter 6 was Daniel's trial in the lion's den. So, in both of those chapters, God's people are suffering under a Gentile kingdom and being persecuted for their faith, yet they overcome and they come out victorious. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were delivered by the fourth man in the fiery furnace. And remember, Daniel says that the Lord sent his angel to deliver me from the mouths of the lions. So we see similar content there. In chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar's great tree is cut down. And in chapter 5, we learn about the handwriting on the wall. In both of those chapters, there is a judgment on the king of Babylon and the empire of Babylon itself. Babylon comes to an end in chapter 5. And in both of those chapters, Daniel is promoted to a high position because of his ability to interpret what's going on. So that's important to understand. Daniel is not chronological, but it does have a sophisticated, logical, intentional order. And that's good to know because it's going to help us to interpret the meaning of the four beasts in Daniel chapter 7. So let's look at these four beasts. The details are very important to help us understand what's going on. These four beasts are going to represent Gentile ruling powers or the Gentile kingdoms vying for power successively throughout history. They are depicted as beasts, so the empires are represented with imagery and symbolism, and so every detail matters. So let's go back through each of the four beasts and try and understand the symbolism. The first beast is described to be like a lion with eagle's wings. This lion is made to stand on its feet. Its wings were torn off. It's made to stand on its feet, and a man's heart is given to it. So the first beast is like a lion. If you think about the lion is the king of the jungle. He's regal. He's powerful. He's beautiful. He is the king of the jungle, a force to be reckoned with. The fact that this beast also has eagle's wings indicates that it is swift. An eagle flies high, it soars above its prey, it has vision of everything going on the earth. And again, an eagle is very swift. So both of those characteristics can be ascribed to Nebuchadnezzar. Remember, whenever Daniel describes Nebuchadnezzar, he says, first of all, he is a king, he is powerful. Whom he wanted to slay, he would slay. Whom he wanted to keep alive, he would keep alive. So Nebuchadnezzar was majestic, he was powerful, and he was a force to be reckoned with. Now, this lion, his eagle's wings are removed. This lion, this beast, is made to stand on his feet, and a man's heart is given to it. We can further connect that to King Nebuchadnezzar. If you'll remember from Daniel chapter 4, the story of Nebuchadnezzar's great tree representing his empire, Babylon. Remember when that tree falls, Nebuchadnezzar goes forth to live like one of the beasts. He goes out and he grazes, he eats the grass of the field, he's covered with the dew of heaven. But at the end of that period of 7, right, decreed by the watchers, Nebuchadnezzar's reason returns to him. His humanity comes back. He lived like a beast for a long time, eating the grass, being covered with dew. And if you'll remember in Daniel chapter 4, we're told specifically that Nebuchadnezzar's hair grew like eagle's feathers. And remember, his nails grew like bird's claws. So we have an association between Daniel's first beast with the eagle's wings and Nebuchadnezzar with the hair like eagles and the nails like talons, like the claws of a bird. But remember, Daniel's beast is made to stand on its feet and a man's heart is given to it. That's exactly what happens to Nebuchadnezzar after he lives like a beast in the field for a period of 7 years. Then his humanity returns and his majesty is restored. He goes back to ruling his kingdom as a man. So there's a lot of associations between Daniel's first beast and Nebuchadnezzar's regal, his royalty, his power as a majestic king, also his experience as living like a beast, growing his hair like eagle's feathers, and then his humanity being restored to him. His man's heart was given back to him. So if we take Daniel's vision of chapter 7, the first beast, and we look back to Nebuchadnezzar, specifically Nebuchadnezzar's dream in chapter 2, we can say that this first beast is very likely representative of Babylon. Also, further associations from other places in the Bible. In Ezekiel 17, Babylon is referred to as the eagle. I think that we mentioned that when we were studying Daniel chapter 4. And Jeremiah 50:17, not in every translation, but in some translations, will connect Babylon and Assyria with a lion. So there's certainly associations between the lion and Babylon. So if these beasts are a retelling of the great Gentile kingdoms, then they are also associated with Daniel chapter 2. If you'll remember, in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar has the dream of the great metal statue, the head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of brass, the legs of iron, and the feet of iron mixed with clay. So we're going to lay these two chapters right next to each other, and we can then understand that Daniel's first beast, the lion with eagle's wings, corresponds to the head of gold. The head of gold represents Nebuchadnezzar himself. Remember, Daniel said to Nebuchadnezzar, "Thou art that head of gold." So let's continue and see if this pattern progresses. Are the beasts of Daniel 7, in fact, a retelling of the metal statue of Daniel chapter 2? The second beast that we're going to look at here, we are told from Daniel 7, is like a bear. This bear is raised up on one side. It has 3 ribs in its mouth, and it is told to arise and devour much flesh. So, if we simply look at the characteristics of a bear is, like the lion, very powerful, a force to be reckoned with, but it is more of a brute force or a blunt force, whereas the lion is more specific in hunting its prey. The bear is just clumsily powerful. The bear, though powerful, is, I would argue, less majestic than a lion. The lion, of course, is the king of the jungle. A bear is certainly a force to be reckoned with, but less majestic than a lion. We are told in Daniel 7 that this bear is raised up on one side. So, what does that have to do with what we're trying to understand here? We're told that the bear is asymmetric. It's stronger on one side than it is on the other. If we continue comparing Daniel's 4 beasts to the statue in Daniel chapter 2, then we could say that the bear that's raised up on one side corresponds to the chest and arms of silver. The chest and arms, notice there's 2 arms, a right arm and a left arm. And in general, the right arm is stronger than the left arm. We learned that the chest and arms of silver represented the Medes and Persians, 2 peoples divided yet united in this empire. So the fact that the bear is raised up on one side is saying there's one side that's stronger than the other, or one side that's taller than the other. One side is dominant, but there are 2 sides. So 2 arms, unequal power. The bear has 3 ribs in its mouth. That could be the 3 nations that the Medes and Persians overcame in order to come in and take power. I may not tell you this correctly. You may have to look this up to back me up. But the nations I'm told are Lydia, Egypt, and Babylon. So the bear comes in and displaces the lion, just like the chest and arms of silver displace the head of gold. So again, we can see associations between Daniel's second beast, the bear raised up on one side, and the chest and arms of silver in Daniel chapter 2, one arm being stronger than the other. Again, two peoples being represented in this one empire. So let's continue examining Daniel's beast. The third beast, we are told, is like a leopard. It has the four wings of a fowl and it has four heads. So if we think about the characteristics of a leopard, the most important thing about a leopard is its speed, right? It's the fastest animal, the fastest land animal on the planet. Well, I don't know if that's true, but it's the fastest beast of the jungle. It'd be the fastest cat in the cat family. Leopards are stealthy. They are incredibly nimble and swift. Like the lion, which had the two wings of an eagle, this leopard has the four wings of a fowl, again, which indicate its directness. Whenever you're a land dweller, you have to navigate on the land around obstacles, but a bird can fly directly from point A to point B with no obstacles. So they're very, very swift. There's four wings of a fowl on this beast, and it has four heads. The fact that it has four heads indicates that there are four main powers. The head is the power over the body, right? So this leopard has four heads. There's four powers for this particular kingdom. Once again, if we lay this third beast next to Nebuchadnezzar's statue from Daniel chapter 2, we could see a correspondence between the leopard with four wings and four heads and the empire of Greece. What we know about Greece is that Alexander the Great was the greatest king of Greece, and he very swiftly and suddenly swept to the east and overtook the Medes and Persians and expanded the Greek Empire. He did this very quickly at a very young age, but he also died at a young age. After he died, his kingdom was divided up into four main segments. And not all scholars agree on the four main segments. Joel Richardson makes a really good argument that there really were five different regions that were divided up from Alexander's empire, but there were four that the Bible focuses on. So he teaches extensively about Daniel, and I highly recommend listening to him. He's very rational, pragmatic, logical, very unsensational, but very faithful to the word. So we could say that after Alexander died, his children did not take over, but his generals did. Cassander to the west, Lysimachus to the east. But the two most important ones that we're going to see reappear in Daniel 11 are the Ptolemies to the south and the Seleucid Empire to the north, or Seleucus, the general in the north, and Ptolemy in the south. When we read about the king of the north and the south in Daniel 11, there's a lot of reference to specifically the Seleucid Empire, where Antiochus Epiphanes came from. So this leopard corresponds to the belly and thighs of brass from Daniel chapter 2, and we can see it's another representation of the Greek Empire. The last beast that Daniel has a vision of, the fourth beast, is indescribable. Daniel doesn't compare this to an ordinary animal on earth. He doesn't say it's like a lion, a bear, or a leopard, something recognizable. He simply says that it is a beast. It is dreadful. It is terrible. It is exceedingly strong. We're told that it had iron teeth, that it devoured, it brake in pieces, and it stamped the residue with its feet. There's a reference to its feet there. This beast was diverse from the previous beasts. Now, if we continue comparing these beasts to the metal statue of Daniel chapter 2, One thing that we're going to notice is that in Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the great metal statue, we have the head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of brass, the legs of iron, and the feet with iron mixed with clay. If we count those, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different empires represented. But Daniel only has a vision of 4 beasts, not 5. So we might come to the conclusion that the fourth beast is connected to both the legs of iron and the feet of iron mixed with clay. And we do have that connection in the details. Remember, the fourth beast, we are told, has great iron teeth. Remember, the legs were made of iron. In particular, we are told that it stamps the residue with its feet. So the feet of Daniel's fourth beast are mentioned. And we can say, well, there's something important about feet in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. The feet were made of iron mixed with clay. So it's possible that elements of the legs of iron and the feet of iron mixed with clay are symbolized in this fourth beast. So there may be 2 phases of that fourth beast. Continuing with our details here, this fourth beast, we are told, has 10 horns. Okay, again, when we're comparing it to Daniel chapter 2, the 10 horns of Daniel's first beast then would correspond to the 10 toes of the feet of iron mixed with clay. So there's so many strong connections between Daniel's 4 beasts and the statue in Daniel chapter 2, and I want you to keep that in mind. But we are given more detail here, more revelation in Daniel 7 than what we learned about the feet that had 10 toes. We are told that a little horn uproots 3, and this little horn has the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things. We weren't told that about the toes. We weren't told that another toe comes up and replaces 3 and is itself an 11th toe. But we are given this further revelation in Daniel chapter 7. We're going to talk a lot more about the little horn here in a couple of lessons. But the fact that it has eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things gives a very human element to that little horn, which is upon this fourth beast. And that fourth beast, again, may possibly have 2 phases corresponding to the legs of iron and the feet of iron mixed with clay. This last beast is diverse from the rest. It is exceedingly strong. We can expect it to have a mighty military that is unopposable, something that would be difficult to make war with. We're going to see that connection to Revelation in the last lesson. So Daniel's 4 beasts, by looking at their details, certainly have correlations to Nebuchadnezzar's statue in Daniel chapter 2. Now, in Hosea 13:7, there's a really interesting verse. It says, "Therefore I will be unto them as a lion, as a leopard by the way, I will observe them. I will meet them as a bear that is bereaved of her whelps, and I will rend the call of their heart. And there will I devour them like a lion. The wild beasts shall tear at them." So here we are told in Hosea, the context of Hosea chapter 13 is judgment on the nation of Israel. And in this passage, we see the lion, the leopard, the bear, and the wild beast. So the lion, like Daniel's first beast, the leopard, like the third beast, the bear, like the second beast. And then notice the last one, the fourth one in the list here, is just called the wild beast. Just like Daniel didn't name that fourth beast because it was indescribable, he just called it a wild, great beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. Hosea mentions the fourth one as a wild beast. Now, something that's interesting in the Bible that happens a lot, when there's a list of 4, sometimes you've got 3 that are similar and the fourth one is set apart. For example, if you look at the first 4 seals of Revelation 6, the first 3 are similar, but that fourth one is distinct and set apart. Another example that we've seen in this particular study, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are in the fiery furnace. They're similar. But then there was a 4th man with him. He was set apart as distinct and unique and different. we see this pattern here as well. It happens even in natural things like the states of matter, for example. There's four basic states of matter. There's solid, liquid, gas, and then there's that state called plasma, which is very different than the other four. You can think of the seasons. Anything that has a four, sometimes you've got one that's distinct. If you think about the four fundamental forces of nature, we have gravity, the electromagnetic force, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. Gravity is the one that's set apart and different from the rest. So there's that interesting phenomena, and we see it here in Daniel 7. The first three beasts are similar. The last one is distinct and set apart, or as Daniel says it, it's diverse from the previous beasts. So in this chapter, what can we conclude from all of these details? There are definitely strong correlations between Daniel chapter 7, his vision of the four beasts, and Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the great metal statue. So it's quite possible that Daniel is simply having a vision which retells or recounts the information that Nebuchadnezzar was given. If that is the case, and we've made a very strong case for that, then we can say the first beast represents Babylon, the second beast represents the Medo-Persian kingdom, the third beast corresponds to Greece, and the fourth beast corresponds to the legs of iron, and then also that last phase, the feet of iron mixed with clay. Now, I'm going to jump a little bit ahead in our notes here. I'm going to go down to an alternative view of these four beasts. So I'm going to go down to a modern perspective. Just food for thought here, things to think about. Some have speculated that the four beasts of Daniel 7 do not parallel the empires of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but instead that the four beasts of Daniel point to modern nations. So Daniel chapter 2 tells us about the ancient empires that ruled over the land of Israel, but Daniel 7 may be giving us new information. Maybe they're pointing to modern day nations. Something to think about. It's something to consider. Here's how the interpretation generally goes. The lion with eagle's wings points to Great Britain and USA. If you look at the symbol of Great Britain, they often have lions on their shields. Great Britain is represented by the lion, but the eagle's wings, if you'll remember, they were torn off, they were plucked off from the lion. And some will see that that eagle, those wings being plucked off from the lion of Great Britain, and later remember the lion is given the heart of the man. The eagle's wings represents USA. The symbol of USA, of course, is the bald eagle. So it's kind of a compelling and interesting interpretation. The bear is associated with Russia. We've all heard of the Russian bear. We know that's a pretty good association. The leopard with four heads and four wings, some have speculated correspond to Germany. Germany has four Reichs. If you'll remember, Hitler was during the Third Reich or the Third Reign. So some say the four heads of the leopard correspond to Germany, and the four wings of a fowl correspond to France. France is often symbolized by a fowl or a rooster. And then the ferocious beast, the fourth beast, is simply pointing us to something like a new world order or a global government or an oppressive global empire of the end times. So I would consider this and think about it. It's a really interesting possibility. However, we do know that there are very strong associations between the beasts of Daniel 7 and Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Now, if we think about Nebuchadnezzar's dream, it begins with Nebuchadnezzar himself, and it stretches all the way down until the rock, not cut out with human hands, arrives and destroys the statue. That rock is the millennial kingdom of Christ. So what we can understand here is that Nebuchadnezzar's statue covers the time from Babylon until the return of Christ. So have we missed details? Is Daniel filling in details that are not revealed in Daniel chapter 2, pointing to modern day nations? Or is it simply that Daniel's visions in 7 actually do correspond to the parts of the metal statue of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. I tend to lean that way. The telling of the vision twice, once given to Nebuchadnezzar in the form of the dream of the metal statue, and then given to Daniel in night visions of these four beasts, I think it's a double telling of the same story, which means that it is a sure and written and sealed prophecy. If you'll remember, when Joseph goes to Pharaoh and interprets his dreams, Pharaoh had the same dream twice with two different details. Remember the sheaves of grain, and the healthy sheaves of grain, and the sickly sheaves of grain. And then he had the same dream of the seven cows, seven fat cows, healthy and robust, and then seven weak cows come and gobble up. He had the same dream twice, and Joseph interprets it, and he says, because you had it twice, it is a sure thing. It is a guaranteed prophecy. In addition, if we go back to Daniel chapter 5, the handwriting on the wall, remember the hand appears and it writes Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parson. It writes Mene twice. That double repetition is simply reinforcing the surety of the judgment on Babylon. And remember, the very night the Medes and Persians came in and took over Babylon. And so it was sealed. It was a done deal because it was repeated. And I think that's what's happening here in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. It's a recounting, a retelling of the same information with newer details. Remember, we get the detail of the little horn rising up, uprooting three, and getting a mouth, speaking great things, and having the eyes of a man. So we get a little bit more detail with Daniel 7, but I think it is certainly a retelling of Daniel 2, although I find this modern interpretation very interesting, and I have an open mind. I'm always learning new things and watching, but we know exactly what the Word of God says, and so that's what's most important. We know also that when the rock, not cut out with human hands, appears in Daniel chapter 2, that it demolishes the statue at once. Some have used the interpretation of the modern day nations to conclude that some nations will be allowed to pass over into the millennium, since it says that their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. But if the beasts of Daniel 7 do in fact correspond with the empires of Daniel 2, we know that they're all destroyed simultaneously. In Daniel 2, verses 34 to 35, specifically verse 35, it says, Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, and no place was found for them. So when the rock arrives and grows into a great mountain, filling all the earth, we know that represents Jesus returning to the earth, setting up his millennial kingdom, and the previous empires are done away with together at that time. So their lives may have been prolonged for a season and a time. That is, for example, if we think about the transition between the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire, if you study the mythology of the Greeks and Romans, it's essentially the same. They just get new names. So the Greek Empire and their pantheon survives in Roman culture, but it's named differently. Even the Roman culture is still alive in our United States. If we look at our architecture, if we look at our Senate, the way our government is set up, it's still influenced by those Roman ideals. We're called a Greco-Roman society. So in that respect, those kingdoms do live on. But we know that when Christ comes back, his kingdom truly will be different from all of these Gentile ruling empires. Daniel 2:44 through 45 reinforces this. It, the rock, shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms. Verse 45, it break in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold. So all of those kingdoms are done away with at once. So the idea that these kingdoms will last over into the millennium, I'm hesitant to agree with that. Again, in verse 45, we are told the dream is certain and the interpretation thereof is sure, even more sure with the added details of Daniel chapter 7. So we're going to go ahead and stop there for this portion of Daniel 7. We've got 2 additional videos coming up for Daniel 7. In the next video, we will talk about um, the appearance of Christ in Daniel 7. And then finally, we will wrap it up with studying the characteristics of the little horn and how it is connected to Revelation 13. So I hope you learned something new. Love to hear your comments and your thoughts. But thanks for your participation on this channel, and I hope you have a great day.